A 78-year-old grandfather was humiliated and beaten by a bank employee, but he didn't return the next day on his own. Before we get started, a little roll call. Write down what city you're from. We're curious where we're being heard from. Now let's go. When Nikolai Petrovich fell into the bank with a broken lip and eyes full of icy calm, the employees realized this old man did not just come to finish his pension. He moved slowly, but there was something in his gait that made even the guard at the entrance suddenly stop picking his teeth and stand up straighter. The girl cashier, who had laughed at his trembling hands just yesterday, hurriedly looked away. No one understood what exactly was going on here now, but everyone could smell something bad in the air. And he just came in, carefully adjusted the collar of his shabby jacket and looked around the room. "Well, hello, bank," he muttered under his breath and walked slowly to the counter. 12 hours ago he had been lying on the cold tiled floor of the same bank. There was a ringing in his ear and the taste of blood in his mouth. A young guy in an expensive suit stood over him, smirking and rubbing his fist lazily. "Now, Grandpa, get out of here. We don't have time to mess with you." It was Alvaro, the 30-year-old head of the credit department. It was he who minutes earlier had thrown his check back, saying that old beggars are a disgrace to the economy. And when Nikolai Petrovich didn't immediately leave, Alvaro decided that education could be done with his hands. The hall was full of people. No one intervened. Nikolai Petrovich stood up, brushed the dust off his knees. He did not say a word. Only looked at Alvaro in such a way that the smile disappeared from his face for a second. And walked away. But he didn't give up. He sat down in a chair by the window, folded his hands on a stick, and waited patiently. The guard cast a suspicious glance at him, but the grandfather looked harmless. He just sat there. At exactly 10:15, Alvaro entered the hall. Confident gait, expensive watch, predatory smile. He didn't notice the old man right away, but when he did, his eyebrows went up. "Are you here again?" he threw irritably, coming closer. "Wasn't yesterday enough for you?" Nikolai Petrovich raised his head slowly. "Did you think I'd just leave?" "Why not?" Alvaro leaned toward him, contempt in his voice. "Or did you come to file a complaint?" "Well, good luck." "Complaint?" Grandpa grinned. "No, son. I've come to teach you." Alvaro grimaced. "What do you even know, old? Speak to me respectfully, boy. It's your credits that may not pay off, but my knowledge always does." Alvaro was about to send him away, but something in the old man's voice made him hesitate. "I didn't come here for nothing," Nikolai Petrovich continued calmly. 20 years ago I developed one of the systems on which your bank is based. And I know where it fails." The hall became quieter. Alvaro grinned nervously. "Bullshit. Are you sure?" Grandfather leaned closer. "Because if you're wrong, tomorrow you won't have a job, a reputation, or the ability to buy suits with other people's money." Alvaro wasn't smirking anymore. "And what do you suggest?" Nikolai Petrovich leaned back in his chair, looked around the room. "Let's talk. But not here." Nikolai Petrovich locked the door, sat down at an old desk and took out a shabby notebook. The cover was faded, the pages yellowed, but the handwriting inside was still the same clear, confident as it had been 20 years ago. He ran his finger over the lines, remembering how long ago it had been. Once he hadn't just been an old man dreaming of getting his pension. He had been an engineer. A financial systems architect to be exact. 20 years ago, he'd helped design software for the big banks. Back then, everyone was just starting to move to electronic databases, and he knew how they worked and where they could break. But one day, he was taken out. Quietly. Asked to resign. Because he knew too much. Nikolai Petrovich closed his eyes. They thought he would just disappear. And he just waited. Now the time had come. He pulled out an old notebook and started making calls. The first number was Lorenzo, a former IT specialist at the bank. "Nikolai?" The voice on the other end of the line was surprised. "Are you alive?" "For now, yes," grinned grandfather. "But if you help me, someone is about to get into trouble." Number 2 is Carlos, a former lawyer who once defended banks from scandals. "Do you want a war?" he asked quietly. "I want justice," Nikolai Petrovich replied. The third number is unknown. Only a short answer. "We'll do the deed." He opened the notebook on the right page. There was a code there. Not just a password, not just a vulnerability. It was a system bug he noticed 20 years ago. If he activated it, the bank would collapse. And he was about to pull the trigger. The bank greeted him with silence. No one was laughing today. No one was throwing crooked smirks. No one was rushing him through the queue or suggesting he come back another day. Nikolai Petrovich entered slowly. The guard at the entrance, the same one who yesterday stood stone-faced when he was beaten, now seemed to shrink. The girl cashier quickly hid behind the monitor, but the grandfather noticed how her fingers trembled. They already knew. Rumors spread quickly. A couple steps and he was across from Alvaro. The head of the credit department sat at his desk, looking as confident as ever. But Nikolai Petrovich saw more than the others. There was a flicker of concern in his eyes. "You again?" Alvaro threw, but his voice was no longer so firm. "Me again," the grandfather replied calmly. He sat down across from him, pulled a folder out from under his jacket and placed it carefully on the table. "Close the door," he said quietly. Alvaro didn't move. "I said shut the door. You and I are going to talk now." Alvaro hesitated for a few seconds, then signaled to the guard. The squad door slammed shut. "What do you want?" he asked irritably. Nikolai Petrovich slowly opened the folder. Tables. Dates. Translations. Evidence. "Do you know what this is?" Grandfather made himself comfortable in his chair. "That's bullshit," Alvaro tried to grin, but the corners of his lips twitched. "They're reports on hidden transactions. Money your bank has been debiting retirees' deposits under the guise of technical adjustments. Tens of thousands of people. Millions of dollars." Alvaro was silent. "You think I came here for nothing?" Nikolai Petrovich looked him straight in the eye. "Do you think I'm an old fool who came to collect his pathetic pension?" Alvaro swallowed. "I have copies of that data. And if anything happens to me, they'll end up in the prosecutor's office." Alvaro exhaled noisily and leaned back in his chair. "What do you want?" "First of all," the grandfather stepped forward, "you recover all the stolen money right now." "That's impossible." "It is possible." Nikolai Petrovich opened the second page. "Here are the instructions on how to do it all in 24 hours. "That's blackmail." "It's justice," the grandfather hummed. "And, believe me, I'm still talking softly to you." Alvaro looked at the papers again. He had lost. He realized it. The bank realized it. The world was about to change. There was silence in the office, thick as old coffee. Alvaro slid his gaze over the papers in the folder, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He was trying to figure out when this old man had become a threat. Yesterday he'd laid at his feet, wiped the blood from his lip, and walked away in silence. Today he sat before him, calm, confident, with documents that would make a bank's horns fall off. "You're bluffing," Alvaro said at last. Nikolai Petrovich grinned. "Son, I don't know how to bluff. It's your job to promise people stability and then take the last of it from them." He leaned forward slowly. "You don't know who you hurt." "Okay," Alvaro pretended to relax. "Let's say you found some shenanigans. But how do you even know about this stuff?" "The same place you do," the grandfather grinned. "The only difference is that I built these systems, and you just operate them." He pulled an old, worn badge out of his pocket. It read, "Nikolai Petrovich Orlov, Chief Engineer, Bank Cybersecurity Department, 1998 to 2004. Alvaro turned slightly pale. You worked at the bank? I was protecting it until you rats started to corrode it. But if you were so valuable, why were you fired? Nikolai Petrovich was silent. Because I once refused to sign a piece of paper saying that customers accidentally lost their money. Alvaro looked away. That's not for me. I've only worked here for 3 years. You're just a pawn. Grandpa stepped forward. But your hands are already in the shit. He opened the folder again and turned the page. See this chart? It's automatic deductions for billing errors. That's about $2 million a month. The money goes into dummy accounts and then dissolves through a chain of companies. I didn't know, Alvaro swallowed noisily. Of course you did. You just didn't care. But I could just throw those papers away, Alvaro tried to grin. You can. Nikolai Petrovich leaned closer. But then I'll press the button. What button? Grandfather smiled. When we designed this system, we had an emergency reset function in case the bank was attacked by hackers. If you activate it, all transactions in the last 24 hours are cancelled. So what? Alvaro shrugged. We'll just restore the system. That's where it doesn't. Nikolai Petrovich opened another page. If a bank has conducted illegal transactions, the system won't just roll back the transactions. It'll start a chain reaction. And your whole thieving machine will go down. Alvaro didn't say a word. He already knew his grandfather wasn't kidding. What do you want? He finally asked. 1. You return all the money you stole. And if the bank won't do it? Nikolai Petrovich shrugged his shoulders. Then tomorrow morning you'll be gone. Alvaro felt a chill run down his spine. This old man had not come for money. He came for justice. And he would get it. Nikolai Petrovich closed the folder, tucked it under his arm and slowly stood up. Think carefully, son, he said over Alvaro's shoulder as he walked toward the door. You have 10 minutes. Alvaro didn't move. His gaze was fixed on the table, but his eyes read only one thing: he had just gotten into such a mess that he didn't even know how to get out of it. Nikolai Petrovich went out into the main hall of the bank. Still the same hall, but not the same bank. Employees, who yesterday smiled and laughed, now looked wary. Someone furtively glanced at each other, someone hid behind the monitors, pretending to work. And the grandfather just smiled. Let them get used to it. This was just the beginning. Exactly 10 minutes passed. Men in strict suits burst through the door. The financial police. Chaos ensued. Everybody stay where you are. Nobody move! The air reeked of fear. Cashiers scrambled away from their computers, managers huddled around the counter. One of them, tall, bald, in an expensive jacket, probably the boss, mumbled something into his phone, but a second later his cell phone was snatched out of his hands. Who the hell are you? He wailed. The answer was short. Fin monitoring. Your bank is involved in financial fraud. Cooperate, and maybe you won't walk out of here in handcuffs. Another 5 minutes passed. The guard who looked at Grandpa yesterday with a stone face was taken away first, followed by Alvaro. But the big moment was ahead. The same employee who had beaten him yesterday remained in the crowd. His face was at first a look of incomprehension, then realization, then pure terror. He'd been taken too. Wait, wait, wait! He screamed. This is a mistake. I'm just a manager. A manager who was involved in money laundering, the police agent clarified. You have the right to remain silent. 15 minutes later, the bank was on fire. Not literally, of course. But for the management, it was hell. We're losing assets, shouted one of the bosses, clutching his cell phone. What the hell? Why are the accounts being blocked? The system is rolling back transactions. Someone yelled. The money is being returned to the customers. What do you mean, refunded? It means that everything we wrote off is no longer ours. Nikolai Petrovich watched this circus from a little distance. He won. This whole system, this whole money-grubbing machine, he broke it without a single blow. All it took was the push of a button. He turned around and, without a word, walked out of the building. It was sunny outside. And he finally felt free. The bus shuddered slightly when the doors closed with a hiss and moved off. Nikolai Petrovich sat at the window, putting his hand on his cane, and watched the streets pass leisurely behind the glass. The city lived its own life. Passers-by were hurrying somewhere, talking, laughing, frowning, cursing at drivers. The odors of asphalt, fried seeds, and light smoke from exhaust fumes mingled in the air. The bank was left behind. The same one where, back in the morning, he had been a miserable, beaten old man. Now he was the one who had brought the system to its knees. But it wasn't joy he felt. Not gloating. Just calm. In his jacket pocket lay a piece of paper folded in two. Nikolai Petrovich unfolded it, ran his eyes over the scrawled letters. You win. Thank you for the science. And signed. Who had written it? Alvaro? Someone on the staff? The director himself, who would now have to explain how his business had collapsed in one day. Grandpa grinned, but it was a sad smile. They didn't feel sorry for him. They felt sorry for themselves. They were afraid for their accounts, for their positions, for their tenured positions. Their cowardice was in that message. But was there a drop of respect? Maybe. He decided it didn't matter much. The bus turned smoothly onto the busy avenue. Nikolai Petrovich watched the young men at the bus stop. Two guys in tattered jeans and with backpacks behind their backs were discussing something, waving their hands. A girl with long dark hair leaned against the glass, typing something on her phone. An elderly man with a newspaper in his hands was standing nearby, reading carefully, frowning. And suddenly he remembered himself. The man he was 40 years ago. Young, ambitious, a little daring. That Nikolai Petrovich had once believed in the system, too. He was the one who created it. Who designed the algorithms that were then used in banks all over the country. But he never imagined that one day his own designs would become a tool for theft. It's never too late to fix it, he thought now. But isn't it? His wife was gone. No son. Grandchildren, who knows what they think of their old grandfather. He suddenly felt time shrink into a small lump. How all the years flew by as if he had yawned, and old age was already ahead. At the next stop, a woman in her 70s entered. Tired, in a shabby coat, with a shopping bag in her hands. She sat across the aisle from Nikolai Petrovich and exhaled heavily, clutching the handle of her bag. That's how it is, she said suddenly, without turning to him. You work for years, and in your old age, pennies. I swear, if I were given the opportunity to turn back the clock. She was silent. Nikolai Petrovich looked at her. The woman seemed tired not only in body but also in soul. Just like himself. And what would you do? He asked quietly. She sighed. I would go to the sea. Somewhere warm. Where there's no one. And where the seagulls. She turned to him and smiled tiredly but sincerely. And you? Nikolai Petrovich hesitated. What would he do? Would he go back to the day when it was still possible to hold his wife's hand and say that he loved her? Or the day when it was possible not to let his son go abroad and try to find a future for him here? Too many would-haves. But life only goes forward. Like this bus. Somewhere outside the window, the phone rang. The guy with the backpack answered, smiled, nodded, began to quickly tell something joyful. Someone laughed. Someone argued. And Nikolai Petrovich just kept silent. Not because he was tired. Not because he had nothing to say. It was just that for the first time in a long time he could do nothing. No one expects him to make decisions. No one is trying to break him. He'd done his thing. He took a breath. For the first time in years, calmly. The bus slowed down. Ahead was his stop. Nikolai Petrovich looked out the window for the last time. The world remained the same. People were still hurrying, laughing, sad. But he knew. Sometimes one person can change more than he thinks. The bus stopped. The doors opened. Nikolai Petrovich got out and walked on. Nikolai Petrovich leisurely climbed the stairs to his apartment. The key turned in the lock, and he entered, leaving behind him the whole world noisy, cruel, but today fair. He took off his jacket, hung it on the back of an old armchair, and exhaled deeply. He sat down at his desk, turned on the desk lamp. There was an envelope in the palm of his hand. Not a simple scrap of paper. A letter from the lawyers. He opened it carefully, unfolded it. The black letters in straight lines said, "The bank has officially pleaded guilty." Nikolai Petrovich allowed himself a slight smile. Not a gloating one, not a triumphant one. Just satisfied. He ran his finger along the lines of the letter. The former employee who had beaten him wasn't just fired. He was facing criminal charges. Not just for assault, but for fraud. Apparently his talents were not limited to one grandfather. The bank itself is being shut down. Its assets have been seized. And most importantly, all the elderly customers he's been defrauding for years will be compensated. Every penny. The money will go back to those who earned it through honest labor. And those who thought they could rob helpless old people with impunity will be left with nothing. Inside the envelope was something else. A piece of heavy paper with a brief text. And signed, "Thank you for justice. What you are owed is already in your account." Next to it was a check. It was an impressive sum. Very impressive. Who sent it? Lawyers? Some former bank employee who didn't want to leave a sinking ship empty-handed? Maybe just someone who realized how the world worked and decided to bring order to it? He didn't know. And he didn't want to know. What mattered was the fact of the matter. Justice had been served.